Hello, and welcome back to Route to Resilience, the podcast where we explore how to build strength from the inside out. Today's episode is a powerful and eye-opening conversation about trauma recovery and the invisible impact of life's experiences. I'm joined by the wonderful Caroline, who experienced a traumatic accident that changed her life in ways she never expected. What's striking is that she walked away with no visible physical injuries, and yet the emotional and psychological impact deeply affected her day-to-day life. In this episode, we're exploring how trauma isn't always obvious, how it can quietly shape our behaviors and fears, and most importantly, how we can begin to rebuild resilience after it. If you've ever felt not quite yourself after a difficult experience, or if something that once felt normal suddenly feels overwhelming, this conversation will help you understand why and remind you that healing is definitely possible. So, Caroline, welcome, and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Anupa.
So, why don't you start by telling us? I know that this is probably quite difficult for you to talk about, but why don't you tell us about what happened?
Yeah, so this was sort of end of 2024. I'd been to Watford to work, stopped off on the way back, had a cheeky Nando's with some school friends, just like a normal day. And then I was driving home on the M25. It was probably I left about 8ish in the evening. And when I was coming up towards the Brentford junction, there was a lane going off. So there was like 4 lanes at this point. There was a lorry to my left in the junction lane going off. I was to the right of the lorry. And just as you normally do, I just was going past the lorry. But suddenly I heard like a massive kind of bang. I didn't quite know what was happening at the time. And then my car started to shake. And then my car started to spin. So I was trying to stop my car from spinning, but you can't stop it. So my car was spinning. I didn't know what was happening, and as it span, I had my foot on the brake, and I kept thinking, right, I've got my foot on the brake. Why is the car still moving? And I looked up, and to the side of me, I could see the lights of the lorry. And basically, what had happened was the lorry was unaware that I'd spun in front of it and was driving my car sideways down the M25. And this probably went on for quite a while. It's hard to tell the time, but it wasn't just like a kind of crash where you just have a sort of a bang and that's it. It was a prolonged amount of time.
So, I think that is obviously very, very traumatic. Can you explain what your feeling was when you realized what was happening?
It's very weird because it all happens in like it's fast but slow, so it's in slow motion. So obviously, obviously you think you're going to die basically, or have like a massive injury, but all of that is going around in your head, even though you're also trying to control your car. And also you hear yourself scream, so the screaming is um, like nothing you've ever heard, basically.
The thing that stands out most about your experiences is that you were sent home straight away because there were no physical injuries, but of course you don't walk away with any physical scars, but there was something deeper happening, like a deeper emotional or psychological scar. So when did you first realize that I am affected by this?
Well, I think you know straight away that something's going to happen. But obviously, you're just dealing with the thing in hand, and also there's a part of you that's like, "Oh, I'm alive. Oof, that's good." So I guess you might have a bit of elation to begin with because you're actually you survived something crazy and you didn't think you were. So that's quite obviously good. But yeah, it took me. I was only 20 minutes away from my house, but it took 3 hours to get home, and it was. I had to do all the calling of all the different services, etc., etc. And so you wouldn't kind of expect that because you'd think something would happen, but I literally was left on the road on the M25 till quite late at night to get myself home. And then you get home and you're like, ah, okay, what's next? Whereas, like you say, if you had a physical injury, someone would say, okay, you've broken your leg, go to hospital, you have physio, but no one sort of warns you. And this must happen like all the time, but no one says, by the way, you're going to start feeling a bit different. You need to look out for this, and this is what you could do. So you just have no idea. So the insurance don't tell you, the traffic police don't tell, no one tells you, by the way, this is going to happen to you.
So you basically were left to carry on with your life as normal, but of course, it wasn't normal for you anymore after that traumatic experience. So what signs did you see after that accident where you were like, okay, I need to get some help?
Well, basically, driving. I didn't want to drive anymore. So I've driven for 30 years. So, I've driven all around the country. I drive a lot for my job. But suddenly, driving was like a bit like someone to ask me to go into a jungle of snakes and spiders every day to get to work. So it's almost like, whew, this is like a massive thing to get to the other side. So to get to, if I wanted to drive to Watford, that would be like, woof, that's a bit like a massive ask. So it was like a huge thing suddenly. So it feels different. You start sort of doing things like checking like the weather, the daylight, everything like that on the apps and stuff, which before I'd have just jumped in my car at any time of day. And also you start, so lorries, and this all comes back to that you're obviously your kind of fight or flight is triggered. Lorries become a bit like tigers. So every time I saw a lorry, that was also the kind of like the enemy. So if I saw a lorry even parked in a petrol station, I'd get a bit of a there's a lorry, like it's going to do something to me, even though it's parked, which makes no sense. But lorries became kind of like evil, basically. Yeah.
I think what's so extraordinary about your story is that you recognize that the trauma was showing up in a way that it's never showed up before. So you were able to differentiate that, like, okay, there's something going on for me which is quite new, and I need to get some help for it. But one of the things that I found extraordinary about your story is that many people experience trauma on a day to day. However, they don't have the gumption to say that maybe I should find some help to deal with this. So, what steps did you take to get help for yourself?
So I actually probably within about a month I tried to get some counselling. I had two not very good experiences with counsellors. Luckily, I found a third, but I'd say if you do have a bad experience, don't think that that's what it should be like. Keep searching out a good counsellor. So the third one I had Steve, brilliant. I also did go to the GP and got some time off, and I had driving lessons, and I know that I'm in a lucky position that I could afford the driving lessons, but that was another way to help me get back onto the road.
So I can just see from your story that you can see how fear shows up for people in their lives and how it can stop them from working or doing what they do normally on a day-to-day basis. But you threw yourself right in and you were like, okay, so I'm going to start driving again. So that's congratulations on doing that. Well done for doing that. I think that's really it just shows how resilient you actually are. Were there any other things that were happening in your life? Was it just the driving that was affected, or did you notice any other experiences in your day to day where you were feeling overwhelmed or unsafe?
Yeah, I mean, you feel, and it's again, probably people that have been in the same situation will know what I'm talking about. You feel like you've gone into a parallel world. And what I mean by that is basically you feel like everything feels different because you can't understand why something you once thought was normal and something you did all the time has suddenly become something that you fear. So it's very strange. So it is like this weird, and that's not just when you're driving. You're kind of thinking about it a lot because you're like, why can't I drive anymore? This is very strange. This is weird. Like, what's wrong with me? So you are very aware of it, like all the time. Yeah. So yeah, it's not just when you're doing that thing.
So you would agree that it changed your life quite dramatically and
Yeah,
significantly.
for sure. It would change your life forever, basically. Yeah.
So how are you feeling about everything now? I know that we talked about you getting help and seeking the right therapist. So how do you feel about everything now after seeking the right help and getting the right help?
Yeah, so now that I've had the therapy and the driving lessons, I'm back driving. So I do drive. I drive on motorways. I don't drive at night on motorways, and I don't think I ever want to, but that's okay. I think I can work around that as long as I can drive generally. So things are in a much better place. Um, yeah, so things are good. But it's never forgotten, but much better.
Let's talk more about the therapy that you did seek out because it was very specific, wasn't it? It was a specific type of
Yeah.
therapy that you did.
So I had EMDR therapy, which, and I'm going to have to look at my phone for this, is called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So I had about 19 sessions of that. And what you do in the session is you either look at a black dot on a screen and you kind of look at this dot, or you do clapping, so you clap your body. And whilst you do that, you look back at the accident, and then it's almost like a stream of consciousness where you're talking about how you're feeling, and you kind of stop the dots, and then the therapist will say, "How are you feeling now?" And you kind of talk about it or what you can see in your head. And I think there's a lot of sort of documentation evidence to say that this works really well for PTSD. I don't think they're quite sure from the evidence why it works as well as it does, but it does. So I definitely say to anybody that suffered a similar thing, I mean, I'm quite cynical, so when I thought I had to like tap my arms, I thought, yeah, this doesn't sound like me. But actually, now I'm a convert, and it's really good. So I'd say definitely give it a shot. It might not be for you, but I think it's worth a shot if you've suffered something similar. Yeah.
Can you explain how you think that helped you in the experience and the trauma that you were having?
Yeah, so basically, and somehow by sort of going through the trauma in these sessions, you it sort of like moves the image of the trauma to the almost like to the back of your head, and that's probably not the technical term for it, but basically, where before perhaps you would see this crash kind of like at the front of your mind, it's still there, but the idea is to make it like a memory looks like, you know, you went on holiday, you had a car crash, but not like a memory that's like flashing up in your head like constantly, basically. So by the end of the sessions, it wasn't sort of constantly in my mind.
Yeah, because the interesting thing is that your trauma
Mm.
was because of an accident, but we are experiencing trauma in different ways, and a lot of people kind of don't realize that the body keeps score and the mind keeps count. So you mentioned earlier about seeing a lorry, and then
Hmm.
even the lorry seemed like a threat to you,
Yeah.
like it was you were going into fight or flight because of seeing a lorry. When you're telling me about the therapy that you had, what I'm understanding from it is that it was rewiring your brain
Yeah.
and teaching it something else rather than seeing that trigger
Yeah.
and associating it to the trauma that you had. Would you agree that that's what was happening?
Yeah, definitely. And so, for example, in my first session, the therapist asked me to talk about a holiday that I'd been on that I really liked, and I was talking about Japan. And then every so often, so we'd look at the image in my head first, then we talk about Japan, and then he kind of got me to do some blinking. Again, no idea how that was working, but by doing that, again, I think it's to associate the image with something positive. Within the first session, it felt like that image was slightly further back than it was. So and I was like, wow, this is amazing. So that's kind of, yeah, you're right. That's the idea behind it.
So I think that the movements that you were doing, like tapping your arm and blinking, somehow was rewiring your brain to and conditioning it in a different way because you had, through this traumatic experience, you had a learnt behavior of feeling fear every time you saw a certain trigger. So I find that really, really interesting, and I just want to say to any of the listeners that it just shows that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that you don't have to live with the trauma and you don't have to live with the fear, even if something traumatic has happened in your life. And Caroline is definitely a great example of this. Was there anything else you wanted to add about the therapy and the trauma that you had, just to give listeners a little bit of hope if they are experiencing something similar to you?
Yeah, I mean, the therapy, you know, I have to say, it's like hard work. You have got to get past it to get to the other side, but it's definitely worth doing. And I think, like Anupa was discussing, basically what had happened was, as I was kind of describing earlier, for me, lorries were like tigers because basically what happens is our brains are programmed to protect us. So when we're young, if we like pick up a pan and burn ourselves, we think, I'm not going to do that again. So my brain was saying, get away from lorries because they're all going to crash into you. But that's quite an intense thing to think all the time when you're driving that you're going to be crashed into. And obviously, I've gone from that to, like Anupa said, now I'm back driving. Um, it's not perfect, you know. I still have a bit of a thing about lorries, but it's much better. So I've driven as far as Durham. I've gone across to Wales. So I've been doing loads of driving. So if I can do that, then everyone out there can do the same.
Many people would probably just carry on and kind of live with this fear and this trauma, which is not ideal, but a lot of people do. So, following on from what I've just said now, if looking back at that experience, what do you wish more people understood about invisible trauma?
It's difficult because I think that I wouldn't have necessarily understood it as well. So if you told me you had a similar car crash and you're like, well, I'm fine, I'd be like, oh, well, you're fine. So kind of get on with it, which I think is what a lot of people think. But I suppose people have got to understand that it's not you being a bit soft or a bit weak or whatever the words people use are. It's to do with, it's your brain basically. That's not in your control. So your brain is, like you said, rewired because of the accident. So people need to understand that although it might seem very obvious that you would just get back in your car and get on with it, it just doesn't work. That doesn't work.
I think there was a mentality that you just push through regardless. Like that was the mentality. I think we've become more and more conscious about therapy and taking care of ourselves and being kind to ourselves. But I still believe that people don't understand that trauma does live in the body and the nervous system. So it's not just in our memories, but it is our body does remember that trauma. Did you notice any other changes in your thoughts and behaviors or reactions that now or later you recognize that was a trauma response?
So I think that you're more aware of things can happen. So what I mean by that is, I guess not just a crash, but you might think that other things are going to happen because you're suddenly aware that you're not invincible, I guess. So you're very aware of that, which I guess on a positive makes you think, you've got to do as much as you can now because you don't know, uh, but not obviously to an extreme. But you don't know what's going to happen next, do you? So always take all opportunities you have in life.
Do you think that sometimes we can suppress experiences without realizing they have shaped who we are and how we live? So, for example, if you hadn't of taken the steps that you did to heal the trauma from this experience, I mean, we can't guess what would have, how you would have behaved, but do you think that you would have potentially suppressed some experiences in the future, and that experience would have then shaped how you would have lived in the future?
Well, I know there's a lot of people that, because I've heard about it now since I've had the crash, have had the same crash and they've never driven again or never driven on a motorway again. So that would be really hard. But I can imagine as well, like people would have turned to drink or drugs in the same situation. That would have been how you deal with it. Because I don't think you could have. I don't think it's a thing you could live with without doing something long term. You just wouldn't be able to. So yeah, I suspect it could go down a bad route if you didn't get help.
Do you actually, I should ask you the question, do you feel like you've gone back to normal? Like you have no fear of driving and it's like it never happened?
Well, that's what I was trying to say about this parallel world. So I don't think it will ever probably be quite normal because I don't think it's such a big thing you can't erase. But maybe like in 5, 10 years, it will be quite far in the past. But no, so when I drive, I'm pretty cautious and I am very aware of what's happened. Because I guess every time I get in a car, I'm reminded of what happened. So maybe it's different with different trauma because generally you don't go back to the thing that triggered your trauma, whereas I'm going back to that thing all the time. So I guess whilst I drive, which hopefully is forever, I'll always be reminded, but it's like 1,000% better than it was, which is really good. So yeah, it's much better, but it's almost like you've skewed off into a parallel world.
I think the thing with you is that you just mentioned that, some people don't go back to the thing that's triggering their trauma. But for you, you had to go back to
Yeah.
that thing. That was your turning point. Was there a particular moment when you were getting the help where you felt like you were beginning to rebuild and build your resilience from what had happened?
I think as soon as I started the good therapy and the driving lessons, because that was probably around the same, it was probably around March last year. So as soon as I did that, you start to see a bit of hope because before that you think this is it forever. I'm going to feel like this forever, which is probably what everyone thinks because it seems almost unimaginable that you could change how you feel, but you can, which is good. So yeah, I'd say as soon as I started doing stuff, because I had 3 driving lessons that were about 3 hours, and by the last one, I was driving down to Gatwick on the motorway. I mean, it was scary, but I was doing it. So, whereas I'd got to a point where I didn't even want to get in my car before that.
Yeah, I really admire your strength because, everyone's felt anxiety before and everyone's felt fear before. It can feel awful. If there is somebody listening now For someone listening who is feeling impacted by something and doesn't think it's big enough to call it trauma, what would you say to them?
I'd say if you're thinking it might be, it probably is. But also, I'd say whatever you feel, everything's personal, isn't it? It's your life and your feelings. So yeah, I would definitely look to seek help and to um, seek out the right help, basically. But don't give up because there are ways to help. There's always a way. You've just got to find it.
If you had decided not to get the help for yourself, how do you think your life would look like for you now?
I'd probably be lying in a wreck on my floor at this moment instead of speaking to you. No, it would be completely different. I'd probably have to have given up my job because I drive a lot for my job. I wouldn't get to see friends as much. Yeah, it'd just be like horrible. It would be horrible. It would be like a completely different life. Whereas now, just cutting out driving on a motorway at night doesn't really affect my life. So, I can do everything I ever did before. So yeah, it would be quite different.
This might be going a little bit deeper into sort of what you were experiencing when you were feeling when you said that you were seeing the lorries and
Mm.
it was a threat for you. It
Yeah.
was like seeing a tiger and you were going into fight or flight. Just explain what was happening, like what was happening to your body or your thoughts, just so
Yeah,
people
yeah.
can, because I think that sometimes people don't realize like exactly what trauma looks like. So it's going to be different for everyone, but what did it look like for you?
For example, when I was driving at first, uh, the lorries are literally, I'm looking out all the time for lorries on the motorway, and when I would go past the lorry to overtake if I'd need to, I could hear, you'd hear the noise basically of the crash. So it's not just visual memories that you have, it's auditory as well. So I'd literally hear the bang, and once I got past it, I would always think, phew, I've made it, I'm alive, which is quite a weird thing to think because I've taken over probably thousands of cars and lorries in my life, but now I'm like, each time it's like, so it's like I'm getting through that jungle. I've got past that tiger. That's what it's like basically. So I'd hear the noise. You'd see it in your head. So it basically everything replays over and over again. So yeah, it's basically you see it. You feel anxious. So like when I was driving, my chest started feeling tight, and I was thinking, what's wrong with my chest? But I didn't realize it's obviously part of anxiety and stuff. So yeah, it's just so I guess it's physical and obviously it's in your head as well.
So it just shows how important it is to find the right help for yourself, like Caroline did. So where would you say that you are in your resilience journey now, and how has this experience shaped the person you are today?
I read a book on trauma, and one of the things it said to do was to find good out of your trauma, which at the time you think, are you kidding me? So what I did was I did my first triathlon last year. I also did my first 50k walk last year, and it's good to have those things because if you're having lots of flashbacks, it's something to concentrate on, and you're doing something for the greater good as well, like the raising money or whatever that might be. Um, so yeah, so I think that's also helped build resilience. And even just like doing this program, and I also had an opportunity to be on the BBC News to talk about the story. So yeah, anything I can do to sort of spread the word and make people understand more about trauma, so that perhaps they might hear my story and that will support them in their journey. That's sort of part of my journey now going forwards, which then ties in with everything happens, well, I don't know if everything happens for a reason, but you've got something bad happen, but you make something good out of it.
Yeah, I think your story is really great because it is a success story. The thing is that we're never going to be able to avoid life's challenges. They're going to happen whether we like it or not. So you can't avoid them. But what you can do is seek help like Caroline did and become a better and stronger person. So thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. Was there anything else that you wanted to leave the listeners with before we end the podcast?
I'm no one special, so if I can do it, everyone out there can do it too. So don't give up, just keep going.
This conversation is such a reminder that trauma isn't always loud or visible. Sometimes it hides in our nervous system, in our habits, and in the things we avoid. but don't fully understand why. Healing doesn't mean erasing what happened, it means gently rebuilding safety, awareness, and trust in ourselves again. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that their experience is valid, even if no one else can see their scars. And if you're ready to build your own resilience, I offer one-to-one coaching, workshops, and talks for organizations. My 4 R's to Resilience program is designed to help you strengthen your emotional well-being in a practical and supportive way. Make sure you follow Route to Resilience so you never miss an episode. And if you found this helpful, please leave a review. It helps these important conversations reach more people. So until next time, remember, resilience is your superpower.